This is Love Your Work. On this show, we help you find your unique signature as a creative entrepreneur. I'm David Cadavy. I've been a solopreneur for more than 10 years. I'm an international award-winning designer. I've written a couple best-selling books, Design for Hackers, and Now the Heart to Start. From my closet in Colombia, I've interviewed titans of industry like Steve Case. I've interviewed best-selling authors like Seth Godin and James Altucher. I've interviewed experts on behavioral science, creators from dancers to a chef to a Hollywood set designer. I want to find out how each of them discovered what made them one in a million, and I bring those insights to you so you can find out what makes you one in a million too. If you are new here, welcome again. I'm David Cadavy. If you want to join us here on Love Your Work every Thursday, please hit subscribe on your podcast app and get my free creative productivity toolkit. Sign up at cadavy.net/tools. Tim Kasher's work is deeply embedded in my creative DNA. When I was a young 20-something sitting in a cubicle in Omaha, Nebraska, Tim's work and his success was always there to inspire me to search for my own creative voice. Tim is one of the pioneers of indie music. He's the frontman of Cursive. Of all of the Cursive songs out there, you're most likely to have heard The Recluse.
How'd I end up here to begin with? I don't know. Why do I start what I can't finish? Oh, please.
The Recluse is on Cursive's most successful album. The Ugly Organ recently passed its 15-year anniversary and has sold an amazing 170,000 copies. Before Cursive, Tim was in a band with Conor Oberst of the band Bright Eyes. Here's a roughly 16-year-old Conor Oberst singing We'll Always Have Paris with Kasher on bass in their band Commander Venus. After leaving Commander Venus to focus on Cursive, Tim also started a folk band called The Good Life. This song is called Album of the Year.
She was convinced I was under the influence of all those drunken romantics. I was reading Fonte at the time. I had Bukowski on the mind.
Omaha in the mid-90s and early 2000s was an indie rock fan's paradise. Artists like Kasher and Oberst cross-pollinated. They started producing their own cassettes and eventually formed the label Saddle Creek Records, featuring bands like Bright Eyes, Cursive, and The Faint. The success of Saddle Creek Records was a sign of the times. The internet was allowing great music to spread. They could use lower cost production and distribution and communication for spreading their music and booking shows, and a cluster of kids from Nebraska could build a fan base all around the world. And I personally always found the story of Saddle Creek Records and Tim Kasher inspiring. When the world was telling me to live one way, it seemed like the band members of the various Saddle Creek bands were always underfoot in any bar that I stepped into. They were there to remind me that you could do things your way no matter where you came from. And I guess that message was still with me when I left Silicon Valley and as I moved to Colombia to double down on writing and making this podcast. The message that you can make it anywhere, that you can get by on the power of your ideas, that you don't have to be in some particular place. I also love that Tim isn't afraid to follow what interests him. He was brave to split genres between Cursive and The Good Life, and now he's branching off into other crafts. He recently wrote, directed, and produced his first feature film, No Resolution. Following the theme of dysfunctional relationships you'll often hear in Tim's lyrics, No Resolution is about a rift between an engaged couple on a particular New Year's Eve.
What? You tell me. Let me get this straight. Now you're mad at me because I wasn't mad at you? I can't do anything.
Mad because you don't care. I am like textbook lashing.
Since Tim is multi-talented, he couldn't stop at writing and making an entire film. No, he even had to make the soundtrack to go along with it. This song is called No Secret.
I got a secret to tell you. You won't be content till you're 6 feet under. I got a secret to tell you. This life is yours to plunder. Oh yeah, it's simple enough to be had.
I'm thrilled to have Tim Kasher on the show. This is a great conversation for anyone looking to find their creative voice and the courage to follow their own unique path. Learn how does Tim think about genre? Fitting into the confines of genre can water your creative work down, but it can also help it find an audience. How did Tim avoid the sophomore slump? He had to push himself to find his creative truth. And how does Tim follow his many interests? You can worry that you're spreading yourself thin, but Tim wanted to pave the way for other artists to do what is interesting to them. And I've been asking my Patreon supporters why they support this podcast, Love Your Work. Why do they pay for something they could simply take for free? Here's Julian, who says he's followed my work for years, and Julian says, it often resonates with me. I am not a real regular listener, but there are periods where I do catch up, and almost every time it blows my mind. So I think your efforts deserve the support. So thank you for that, Julian. Something that many of my friends know, there are no words that I live to hear more than the words, that blows my mind. So when you say that what you hear on this show blows your mind, Julian, you absolutely make my day, you make my life. Maybe something you hear on the show blows your mind once in a while. Maybe it's just every once in a while. Julian says he doesn't even listen that regularly, and his mind is still blown often enough to keep supporting this podcast. So if anything on this show ever blows your mind, let me know, because I love to hear that. And then go support the show on Patreon. Go to cadavy.net/donate. That is cadavy.net/donate. Now, here is Tim Kasher. I'm here with Tim Kasher of Cursive and The Good Life. I want to start with the first time that I ever saw you perform, which was at the Crescent Moon on 35th and Farnham in Omaha. And it was Karaoke Night. And I walk in, and there's this guy singing Miss Independent by Kelly Clarkson in like this amazing punk rock voice. I mean, I guess I could say he was screaming it. And I'm thinking like, this is pretty good. And then I realized like, oh, it's Tim Kasher. Is that something that you do often? Do you sing pop songs in your hardcore voice at random karaoke nights?
I did that. I was really into that for a while. We had a whole scene that we're running around going to karaoke bars. It was a blast. I was also younger then, and my vocal cords were like far more agile than they are now. I guess I always got kind of a kick out of the fact that I could sing female leads as high and as well as I could. I did have access to like a real high register. It
was really beautiful. Like, I think you could make an entire cover album, do like a Ryan Adams. Ryan Adams did the 1989 Taylor Swift's album.
Right, yeah.
I couldn't get it out of my head. I don't know if you would have been cool with this, but that was before there were cell phones with video cameras on them anyway. I couldn't just like quickly record it or something, because it was amazing.
I would love to see some of those performances back then. I'm sure they're absurd.
Around that time was when The Ugly Organ came out. Recently passed 15 years, 170,000 copies. When I heard The Ugly Organ, I was thinking like, this guy's like done making music. I can't stop the monster I've created. Fall in Love to Fail to boost your CD sales. What was going on with you creatively that drove you to write that album?
You know, in a lot of ways, that record's is just the next record in a list of records. I mean, I hadn't done a ton yet at that point, but I think I'd already started to feel like I was getting into the swing of things a little bit. That's probably at the very early stages of what became a very steady songwriting process, I guess.
It was a follow-up to Domestica. And I think Domestica was probably, your breakout album.
Yeah, it's not even that Domestica didn't have like such great success or anything. But for us coming from Nebraska, or just say coming from a place where you had no expectations, it was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. I kind of hated the voices in my head that were, suggesting that, you have to like some sort of upward progress from this. I just thought those types of voices kind of get convoluted when you're trying to just make the next record. I didn't like the idea of it getting confused with commerce.
You saw probably more success than you ever expected with Domestica. Were you kind of feeling a little bit of pressure to maybe fit into a certain type of mold, and then The Ugly Organ was a meta rejection of that?
Yeah, but that pressure was really only from myself, I'd say. All of us musicians that talked about that since we were like young teenagers of what must it be like for bands when they put out a record that's like received and then you have to do another one, or like.
And there's this idea of the sophomore slump.
Totally. That's exactly what we talk about a lot. Yeah. We as in like not just Cursive, but like all of us, like the Faint and Bright Eyes, we all were always just trying to write a better record. It wasn't competitive in any like ugly way, but it's competitive like in a very playful way, that we weren't just trying to write a better record than our last one. We were trying to write a better record than any of us had done yet. It felt like a really healthy way to just always be trying to like get better at at your craft.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but this again, some of those sardonic lines they were directly related to all of a sudden the national journalism and whatnot was like paying attention to Domestica and giving it good reviews, and people coming out to the shows, which was totally awesome. That part we always really loved. I mean, I should say I probably loved all of it. I just was confused by some of it as well. Because I know that a lot of these lines kind of come specifically from Art is Hard, which kind of becomes like some sort of like manifesto for that record. I can tell you a tiny story of like why I wrote those lyrics. I was still working on those lyrics in the studio because I had done revision after revision, like total rewrites of that song over and over again. Because I really felt like it was the strongest song on the record. And so it really needed to have like a really hot set of lyrics. And I kind of caught myself trying to write what I thought was going to be like the deepest sentiment or like the heaviest emotion. And it all felt really phony to me. And I kind of knew it was phony because I was trying to respond to what I thought I was supposed to do as a songwriter. It left me all just really, bitter. It kind of left a sour taste in my mouth about myself, but it was a good learning experience. And I ended up writing those like very sardonic lyrics that are all just like an attack on myself for attempting to compromise this art of songwriting just to like follow up, just to avoid a sophomore slump or something,
Oh, second verse, where color meets fatigue. I'm hiding in the leaves, in the CD jacket sleeves. Tired of entertaining some double death meaning. A sauce of analogy, this drunken angry slur. Yeah, 31 flavors.
Yeah, I mean, I always think that this is probably part of what happens when somebody has a sophomore slump. My theory is you have this success and then you get the media attention and everything, and people are expecting this certain thing from you. And maybe some of that freshness gets lost because the thing that was fresh when you made the first album becomes a thing that's expected of you. And you start fitting your work into that template and lose your ability to do what comes naturally to you in that place and time.
It's all right, or that could be the danger anyway, I think that when I was doing Ugly Oregon, I think everything was still, I didn't have to write those Art is Hard lyrics. Like everything was fine. I was being very honest with what I was writing, like I was really pushing myself to be as creative as I could. I was pushing myself to like just write the next best record I could come up with. I don't think it had much to do with the expectations to follow up Domestica or anything like that. I think if anything, I would have been guilty of trying to sabotage that in some ways. I think the Ugly Oregon sounds more like our real voice than Domestica does. I really respect Domestica, but I think it's we're wearing our influences a little bit more transparently on our sleeve as far as like post-hardcore and stuff.
Like Fugazi.
Yeah, exactly. And to my memory, it was kind of like the Ugly Oregon was like the first chance of me kind of getting back to like, okay, well, if people are kind of into what I'm doing, maybe I'll just write whatever the hell I feel like and see how that goes. Mm. And it's not that I don't think that I was compromising too much with Domestica, but I do wonder if I was being a little more conservative with Domestica when I wrote it. Trying to make sure that I fit in with the cool crowd, kind of.
Oh, okay.
As a musician, you just really want to be received, and especially when you're young like that. To me, I wonder if Domestica isn't just like, it's not exactly like the most pure based example of my writing, but instead like I was, again, taking like a more conservative tact to like make sure that this is the type of music I love. So if I do music like this, perhaps it'll be good or something. I don't want to be too hard on that record, but
I mean, that's great. I love that record. But so you were, you were thinking a little bit about genre.
Yeah, and we always wanted to be genreless. And I think that in Domestica, I kind of fell into that whole trap a little bit, but that's fine.
Well, it's interesting that it was kind of your first Breakout Album then? I mean, genre is one of these things that as a writer, I'm like, I have an idea of a book I want to write, but I want to look on Amazon and see like, okay, well, how am I going to categorize this? Or this is a thing that authors do. I mean, that can obviously backfire, but there's people who are looking for stuff in this genre.
Right. Yeah.
It sounds like from a business standpoint, it was a good idea.
Perhaps. Yeah, I suppose maybe it was. Yeah, I mean, like played a little more conservatively. I'm sure that 24-year-old me would be very angry to hear 43-year-old me like just attacking 24-year-old me, for these things, because I'm sure I wasn't thinking about stuff like that, but I think I was subconsciously maybe being a little more careful. So
you said that you might have, if anything, been sabotaging things with the Ugly Organ. It's almost like you did this thing where you're paying a little attention to genre, you're being a little strategic with how can I make this an appealing album? And now you have this audience and it's like, okay, now's my chance to show you who I really am. And part of that is perhaps making fun of the genre itself.
Yeah. What you're describing has borne one of my main pieces of advice that I like to give to young songwriters: to write exactly whatever it is that you think music should sound like, and then just hope that people care about it.
Mm-hmm. I found this exact same thing happening with the latest book that I wrote, which was try to do a traditional publishing route and do the proposal and all that stuff. And then when I finally said, oh, this feels wrong, and started writing what came naturally, it was easier. And then it turned out to be more resonant. It's a nice thing to remind yourself every once in a while as a creator is like, what's the truth?
I'm a big believer in that too. You haven't read screenplays of mine, but I'll write different genres of screenplay, and in ones that are closer to my lifestyle or my existence or my point of view, it seems like people resonate more to those versus the thrillers that I write, where I'm just kind of trying to tell an exciting yarn or,
There's these very structured ways of writing screenplays now, right? Formulaic ways of writing screenplays to fit certain genres, and you can do those things, and they probably work. But as you're saying, it sounds like the other ones that are more true to you are more resonant.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's always telling, and it's a good reminder too about writing what you know.
But do you find the genre exercise still useful for you? Do you find it seeping into your regular work?
Yeah, and I think it's useful, and it's just so much fun as well. To take it back to music, if you were to start a jazz band, it's going to help your musical growth a lot.
To learn the standards and that stuff, yeah.
Yeah, or just tackle, music or whatever it is you're doing from a different perspective. And
then ask yourself, what is the truth?
Yeah.
You mentioned the early days. I'd love to go back to that, the early pre-Saddle Creek days, Slow Down Virginia, Commander Venus with Conor Oberst. Were you aware that you were isolated in Omaha? Did you feel a sense of lack of opportunity as a musician because of where you were?
Yeah, I think so. I think the feeling of being that closed in, and this also might also be kind of pre-internet conversation too. It was a revelation to me because we really wanted to play music at 13. And that was, that was cool. We definitely loved alternative music, that's what we call it. That's what I still like to call it. And just wanted to be a part of it. But the Nebraska version of being a part of it, as far as our brains could wrap around the idea of being musicians, was learning those cool songs. We could conceive of being in a band. We saw other high school bands being cover bands. I could conceive of, we could learn these Cure songs and these REM songs and these Clash songs, and then go play Homecoming. When some older kids opened me up to the local music scene, and I saw that there were people just my age or a couple years older than me that were doing all, only wrote their own songs and went out and played them for audiences, blew my mind. And I think that's not a similar experience if you grew up in Chicago or New York.
We're going to take a quick break. I'm really excited to have Skillshare back on the show as a sponsor of Love Your Work. I know that you will love Skillshare because you're a Love Your Work listener, and Love Your Work listeners naturally love to learn. And if you aren't familiar with Skillshare, it is an online learning platform with over 18,000 classes in business, marketing, entrepreneurship, technology, and more. They have everything. A class that I personally really enjoyed is called The Writer's Toolkit, 6 Steps to a Successful Writing Habit. It is by author and screenwriter Simon Van Boy, and it will help you get into the writer's mindset.
So, when surgeons work, it's blood and things moving and it's not like working on a sketch from Grey's Anatomy. So just get used to the fact that you're going to be in the gore, in the trenches, and nothing's going to feel like it's working, probably.
Join the millions of students already on Skillshare today with a special offer just for my listeners. Get 2 months of Skillshare for just 99 cents. 99 cents. You can't even buy a decent pen for that price. Anyway, that is right. Skillshare is offering Love Your Work listeners 2 months of unlimited access to over 18,000 classes for just 99 cents. To sign up, go to Skillshare.com/loveyourwork. Again, go to Skillshare.com/loveyourwork to start your 2 months now. If you're a creative entrepreneur, you need more than just a beautiful website. You need a powerful website. Success isn't just getting your products online. It's getting your products into the hands of the customers who will love them. I'm honored to have Weebly sponsoring Love Your Work. With Weebly, you don't just get an easy-to-build website with great-looking templates. And by the way, as a designer, I have to say, Weebly's templates are stunning. With Weebly, your website is not just beautiful. You also get tons of tools to help you turn that website into a business. This means features to help promote your products, process payment, manage inventory, send marketing campaigns, and get discovered by new customers. Stuff that gets you paid. Stuff at the intersection of your love and money Venn diagram. Weebly is offering 15% off just for Love Your Work listeners at Weebly.com/loveyourwork. That's right. As a fan of Love Your Work, go to Weebly.com/loveyourwork. That's Weebly, WEEBLY.com/loveyourwork. And you'll get 15% off when you sign up for your online store. Weebly, more than just a beautiful website. Do you remember the first time that you had that experience of seeing somebody like Simon Joyner playing their own song?
I do. I remember the first time I saw Simon Joyner. He was opening up for Vic Chestnut, and Simon and I are like the same age. It was for his very first cassette, Umbilical Chords. So we were probably both around 16 years old or something like that, and I bought that cassette and have been buying every record since, So he was part of it. It was, although I've always thought of him as older just because I saw him as older because he was doing something that was so advanced to my impression of what I could be doing. I remember an older buddy taking me to go see Mercy Rule. Kind of gives me like chills thinking about it because it was such a life-changing night for me. It really forever changed my my trajectory.
Did you immediately go home and write your first song then?
I don't remember that, but probably I already was writing some stuff. But I wasn't looking at it in the same way that they were, which was like, whatever, like I write my own songs and I go and I put together a set and I go play it at the FOE, I couldn't wrap my head around that. I could only wrap my head around, I want to be creative and I have song ideas in my head. And I think I had like I can think of two, maybe like 3 songs versus now when I'm just like writing all the time. But like I, was 14 and I had like a couple ideas. I show my best friend Matt and he'd be like, wow, that's pretty cool. You wrote a song.
This is something I've thought about as somebody creating things. I realized at some point that where I was growing up, there weren't other people who were musicians or entrepreneurs or authors or things like that. And so it was almost like the things that I consumed, whether it was like for your case, a Cure song, like it might as well have grown on a tree or something. Like it wasn't made by a person, like the same way that, your buddy who lives next door is a person.
Yes, exactly. It was very cool, but wasn't an option. It wasn't something you could do. And I do think that you'd have a difference of opinion if you grew up in New York.
It also depends on what your parents do or do you have artists in your family or actually do you?
Yeah. I don't. That's actually a big part of it too. You're right. If I would have had sisters and uncles that were in the business, I would have been hip to the idea a lot sooner.
So there was something about seeing those local bands that it seems like suddenly flipped a switch that, these are flesh and blood people making songs that are original songs and playing them in front of people rather than playing a cover.
Yeah. And it gives you confidence too, I guess, to see it's a real person and it's a person who's from Nebraska. And so maybe they certainly seemed a hell of a lot cooler than me, but maybe that's tangible.
what was the timeline like then from going to you start writing songs and playing them in front of people, and then you start like selling cassettes out of the back of the trunks of cars and stuff?
The first cassette tape we did, it was our band March Hares in high school. I think it was like a 7 or 8 song record, cassette. And now this is maybe where you could kind of flip the script, where it was the benefit that we came from, that we grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah.
Because it was such a novelty that there's these like 15 and 16-year-olds that had like the stick-to-itiveness to like play homecomings and proms and save up enough money to go to the recording studio and to even, manufacture their own cassettes. So we got, an article in the paper and some AM station, KFAB or something, I think, did a, like we were on the radio to talk about it. And that was really kind of crazy. But that's something that probably wouldn't, because New York doesn't really care about the 16-year-old who's making cassettes, So we ended up getting to be like a very, very novel, and that's kind of what Conor ended up going through too, but he ended up doing it more on the national level of like, wow, look at how young this boy is, who's writing really good songs. But anyway, that I do kind of cite that early attention is kind of like the start of that snowball. Like I've been in it ever since then.
Well, where do you think the stick-to-itiveness came from to do this thing that, it sounds like nobody else you knew was doing, of manufacturing these cassettes?
I don't know. That might have more to do with Matt, my best buddy growing up, Matt McGinn, and we're still playing Cursive together. We do all of our businesses together. And
he's more like the executor, like the operations guy.
Absolutely, yeah.
You've really skipped around like in genre. You've done like this hardcore emo thing and then folk music with The Good Life. Did you ever feel pressure to stick with a genre or feel like, I'm kind of going to be spreading myself thin if I go do this other thing?
I really appreciate that. It's a really insightful question that people don't usually ask me, because I think it's so interesting, because it was a huge qualifier in my life of like where I went and what I did, especially when I had kind of already like made this mark with Domestica. I had a lot of self-examination about whether or not I could now that I'm this post-hardcore guy, am I allowed to do all the folk stuff that I love? There wasn't like a mold for that. And I thought people would really hate that. And I'd really kind of be forsaking, this angsty voice that I was portraying for people, or that I was satisfying for people. I just kind of kept saying like, well, there's no one who really does this yet, but you could just be the person who does it. And that's okay. Maybe you can like help pave the way to make it seem like more normal. And I don't even know if that really ever truly worked, but I believe that there are people out there that listen to the same stuff I do, which is like, sometimes I want to listen to hardcore and sometimes I want to listen to something from like Lilith Fair.
It kind of makes me wonder if part of your confidence in that came from your success on Saddle Creek, or becoming a successful musician in Omaha when not that many people were doing that, but then it gave you the confidence to go ahead and try different genres if that was what was interesting to you.
I think I only felt confident enough to do the records and release them, but I didn't feel great about it. I remember being pretty worried about it. And I remember back then, as people were kind of like learning who I was, and it was like kind of after Ugly Organ, I remember feeling disappointment because I'd be playing pretty big Good Life shows after the Ugly Organ, and kind of watching people leave, because we were, we brought congas out on stage. Like we were just doing a totally different thing, because I wanted to be a versatile artist. I just didn't want to be like one note. I still don't want to be like one note anything. But I also, I watched that and I accepted it. I was like, you know what? You knew this wasn't going to be for everyone, and you have to live with it. It's like, it's the choice you made.
Oh, they thought like, here's Tim Kasher's other band is probably a lot like Cursive, and they go out and it wasn't what they expected. But I don't know, maybe some people appreciated you even more because of that.
I hope so. I always have that's been ongoing forever is people giving me this apologetic, like, I've always been a Good Life fan, or they say I've always just been a Cursive fan. Mostly though, they say it about the Good Life because they think that's the one that would feel contrary, because it's the one that wasn't ever as highly received as Cursive was. To me, it's always like, that's great. I think that's really great that if you ever found anything of use out of anything I've written, that's just a compliment. It doesn't really matter if you like one more than the other. I will say that anybody who likes both of them that's my favorite.
And so, not just in music doing different genres. Now you are a filmmaker. So you write a ton of screenplays. You just have put out this new film, No Resolution. And how about your thoughts on that? Did you ever feel like, oh, I'm going to be spreading myself too thin, I should stick with music?
I hadn't really been thinking about it while I was saying it, but it's funny how similar it is to that genre splitting with music. But yeah, now it's kind of like, I also am making movies, and I really wish that you'd come with me on this journey, to like see what I'm doing over here. And it's scary. Again, it's scary all over, but it's just what I really believe in. And it's about not wanting to be one note. There's just so many different mediums out there to get excited about, especially in this era that we've been born into, motion pictures, and now with the golden age of TV. And there's so much out there. And I know I'm the type of person who just kind of wants to be a part of it.
Were there things from making music or being in the music business, skills that transferred to doing filmmaking? Or were there things where, because you were used to making music, you expected things to be easier in filmmaking and they turned out not to be?
I will say that filmmaking is truly daunting. There are so many knobs to twiddle. There's so many like moving parts. I can see an album from the top down, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. In your own head, you can kind of see like, well, here's the logistics. How are we going to get this musician for this song? And
and I think it took me a long time to be able to like wrap my head around that. But I did feel a foolish confidence that I'd learned how to manage that craft well enough that I could take those management skills into filmmaking. And I did manage to do it, but there was so much to it. It was crazy. Maybe it was just enough confidence just to kick myself in the butt enough to go ahead and like actually do the movie. And
you ended up making No Resolution yourself. You made it in your apartment in Chicago. It's an excellent movie. It takes place in very few locations. Previous to that, it sounds like you had a couple false starts with trying to do things where you were dealing with the financiers and partnerships and things like that, but that stuff didn't work out. Is that about correct?
Yeah. The false starts I had in the past is with two different scripts in particular. It was all more or less for good reasons. It was having the good problem of people like in the movie business that wanted to be a part of it and wanted to secure like proper money for it. And you just don't say no to those kinds of, it's like actual real help in the business, and I need it. But I made No Resolution as kind of as a response to the more recent of those scripts falling through. The response being, I've wanted to just make a movie for a long time, and I don't want to have to depend on anybody to do this. I actually just want to make these just in the same way that, we made our first records. So it was important to me just to go ahead and do it. It's just so nice because it actually got made. I mean, that's the main difference between No Resolution and those other scripts. The other scripts are still, collecting dust on the shelf.
Yeah, I can relate. I mean, a similar thing for me with writing books, of having one traditional one and then pursuing the next one under a traditional route, and then eventually being like, no, I want to do it myself. And now that I have, I don't want to do it any other way. Yeah,
I feel the same. I know that I should take help if it's there, but I also, if I were to get help for the next film, I'm not going to be happy about it. I'd much rather do it the way that I did with No Resolution, with like a little bit more money and with a little bit more, other than that, honestly, I wouldn't do it that much differently.
In a way, it helps to go out and do things on your own, so that when you start doing things with other people, you kind of know what you're talking about and can actually manage the relationship in the process.
Yeah, I would hope that would help. I haven't been able to put that into action yet, but
yeah. I hope so. I would recommend to people to check out No Resolution. You can rent it or buy it on Amazon. And there's an album that goes along with it. That's very exciting. That was a thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about, is this idea of being able to make an album and the movie to go together. That's amazing and incredible. Is there one final message to sum up what we've talked about today?
Probably just what I was saying earlier, of just if you are a creative and that's what you're wanting to get into for whatever medium it is, you should really just work on finding your own voice and then just execute that as best you can. And just like hope like mad that people care about that. Anywhere else where you'd like for people to find more of your work? Well, we have our label that Cursive started. It's a 15 passenger. So it's 15passenger.com, and you can probably find most of this information over there as well. And I also have my own website, timkasher.com. Great. Tim Kasher, thank you so much for taking the time. Yeah, thank you. Nice talking to you. Is Love Your Work helping you find the intersection on your love and money Venn diagram? Does it bring you the inspiration and motivation to make you into the person that you want to be? If so, we, together, you and I, can make this the show that we want it to be. I'm trying to make a nourishing and thoughtful show, and I could use your help with that.
please donate to the show. Just a coffee a month will help support the hosting and production of this show. Just a coffee a month will help spread Love Your Work's message, helping more people live a balanced life with a healthy definition of success. To donate, visit our Patreon page at cadavy.net/donate. Patreon is a platform that lets you support creators like me, vote with your dollars, and keep Love Your Work going at cadavy.net/donate. As a thank you, you'll get early access, bonus content, and a discount on Love Your Work merchandise. Learn more at cadavy.net/donate. That's cadavy.net/donate. Love Your Work is made possible by top supporters, such as Arif Akhtar. This has been Love Your Work, and I'm David Cadavy. The theme music for this show is At Sea by Dorena from the album About Everything and More by arrangement with Deep Elm Records at deepelm.com. Love Your Work is a production of Cadavy, Inc.